Oh my god, it's a brand new Albums I Missed video! And I missed a lot. I mean, whew, this was an oddly busy February. So with that in mind, let's not waste any time. Let's get right down to fucking business. First up, we have a brand new studio album from Transatlantic, a progressive rock supergroup featuring current and former members of Kaipa, Spock's Beard, Marillion. You even got Mike Portnoy on drums, who's worked with everyone from Dream Theater to Avenged Sevenfold to Twisted Sister to The Winery Dogs to Adrenaline Mob to BPMD to... You know the fucking drill by now. He's a fucking superstar. This is their first studio album in 7 years. It is a concept album. It is an hour and a half long, and it's okay. It's just kind of okay. I feel like the prog rock nerds are blowing their loads a little too early on this. The musicianship and the production here is remarkable. It's incredible. Let's make that very fucking clear. I am not for one moment going to argue that these guys don't know what the fuck they're doing, because they absolutely do. I am simply going to argue that the material that they are playing just isn't especially interesting. It feels weirdly formulaic by the standards of progressive rock. It doesn't really sound that much different than anything I would expect from Old Yes or Asia or Kansas or even Rush. It's very bloated, very overwhelming. It feels very repetitive, and as a result of all of this, it becomes very tiresome. And it's a genuine shame, because I don't really think there's anything wrong with any piece of music on this record. It's just too much, you know? Like, individually these songs are fine, but in the context of this hour-and-a-half studio album, it's just too much. Anyone pining to return to the glory days of 70s and early 80s progressive rock is probably going to have a ball, and more power to you, but I'm just not really feeling it. Next up, we have Perfectly Preserved, the sophomore studio album from Love and Death. This thing fucking sucks. It is a genuinely soulless and over-processed piece of butt rock and pop metal tripe with terrible fucking lyrics, terrible musicianship, terrible melodies, just terrible everything, and not even terrible to the point where it's fun to talk about. The biggest issue with this album is that, above all else, it is so fucking boring. Like, I tried to sit down and record an album review for this, and I had nothing. I sat here for literally 20 minutes trying to think of something other than it's fucking boring, and nothing came to mind, because there's just nothing else to really talk about. It's just so fucking lame, so fucking predictable, so fucking boring. I can very honestly say this is one of the worst experiences I've had listening to an album in 2021. You can honestly expect to see this album on my top 5 worst albums list at the end of the year. Like, I'm fucking serious here, folks. Unless somebody manages to release something that is somehow even more fucking boring than this, Love and Death have a guaranteed spot on my worst albums of the year list at the end of 2021. Next up, we have Sharks Fly, a surprise solo EP from Rody Walker of Protest the Hero fame, but don't let that name fool you. None of the progressive flair and flavor of Protest the Hero is found here, but what we do have is some pretty fun, pretty raging, well-written and produced pop punk. It's catchy, it's clever, it's fun, Rody sounds great, it's really cool to see him playing drums and bass and guitar on this thing as well. I'm normally not even really a huge fan of pop punk, but I'm genuinely really enjoying this. I like this EP a lot. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say, mostly because there's just not much to say. It's 13 minutes of really fun, catchy pop punk. Stay tuned, because apparently Rody Walker has a full-blown studio album coming out within the next month, and yeah, I'm kind of pumped to hear it. Who knows, maybe I'll even review it. Maybe. We'll see. Next up, we have another EP, this one being Timeless from Of Mice and Men, and it's fine. Yeah. It's fine. It's the same incredibly formulaic post-hardcore melodic metalcore tripe that they've been putting out over the course of the last decade. It's well produced. It's not terrible. Yeah, I got nothing. This thing's just lame. Moving on. Next up, we have the Cyclic Reckoning from Suffering Hour. This is an album I've heard a lot about in the past month. Everyone seems to be loving it. It is weird, it is demented, it is perverse, it is angular. It's definitely a lot more ambitious and creative than your typical underground black metal release. I'll give it that, but respectfully, I would argue it is maybe a little bit overhyped. For one, the music itself just isn't really sticking with me. The riffs are a little bit too weird. The vocals are a little bit too raw, and the sound mix as a whole is a little bit too ugly and underproduced. I think something a little bit more modern, something a little bit more crisp and clean would have done this album a world of wonders. I'm also not really vibing with the vocals on this thing. It just kind of feels like that standard black metal shrieking and shouting, except now it's caked in fucking static and underground noise. Yeah, I don't know what else to say, man. I've listened to this album quite a few times. I've given it a good, honest fucking try, but it's just not sticking with me. Next up, we have Välde from Humanity's Last Breath, another album that I've seen pretty much praised across the board. Metal Trenches is pretty much in love with this thing. Unfortunately, I have to say that I feel like this album might also just be a tad overhyped. It's by no stretch terrible, don't get me wrong. It's a pretty hefty and ambitious slice of like blackened deathcore with a lot of brutal riffs and nasty breakdowns. But it's also very, 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 very repetitive, I find. I feel like it repeats a lot of different sections and a lot of different choruses and breakdowns. A lot of the songs kind of bleed together for me, and the production just feels a little stale, for me at least. There are some cool ideas and soundscapes on this thing, and I think overall I would weirdly recommend it to anyone looking for something a little bit different out of their deathcore, but all things considered, it's just not connecting with me. Next up, we have Product of My Environment from Jarhead Fertilizer. This is a brutal death and extreme metal project that's been kicking around for just about 6 or 7 years now, but has only now released a debut studio album. And by golly, is this thing heavy as holy fucking hell. The album practically bathes and marinates in violence and hatred and spite. There's not a single riff, a single song that does not absolutely fucking kill, and it does so much within a relatively short amount of time, clocking in at a remarkably trim 20 minutes. I fucking love this thing, honestly. It's very rare that I find myself really excited about brutal death metal, but I'm really, really, really fucking loving this thing, and I would highly recommend it to anyone out there looking for some seriously brutal fucking death. I kind of wish I had done a review, but on the bright side, there are other people who have done reviews, namely Pair of Jeans. So if you're looking for something a little bit more in-depth, go say hello to that motherfucker. Next up, we have the debut self-titled album from Forhist, a new traditional and atmospheric black metal project featuring members of Blood Os Nord. And honestly, it is fucking fantastic. A remarkable fusion of the best elements of early enslaved Emperor Burzum in one remarkably trim and cohesive package. The songs are so mysterious and cold and dark and brutal, filled to the brim with eerie, foggy, misty soundscapes, nasty vocals, nasty riffs. It's so authentic to the sound of second wave Norwegian black metal that if you told me this was made in like 1995 and only recently unearthed, I might have believed you. If you are looking for some truly spooky old school black metal, you need this. You need this right now. Next up, we have Nostophobia, the debut album from Sea Sleeper. Now, this is a project that a colleague of mine, Sexy Luca, has been paying very close attention to. As far as he's concerned, to paraphrase him somewhat, this is quite possibly one of the most unique metal projects in recent memory. I would somewhat disagree with Luca on that particular point, but credit where it's due, Sea Sleeper have a pretty cool fucking sound, and a pretty cool fucking album under their belt. Very heavy, swampy, progressive sludge metal, very much in the vein of old school Mastodon and Baroness, with maybe just a touch of Alice in Chains and even some more recent Opeth. A lot of vocal effects, a lot of weird guitar harmonies, and a lot of crippling grooves. It is a very uncompromising little creation, to put it bluntly. Maybe not quite as unique and original as Sexy Luca would like to advertise, but a pretty damn fun slice of progressive sludge nonetheless. Anyone pining for the glory days of Mastodon is going to have a ball with this thing. Next up, we have Empyrean from Paranorm, a very spicy, nasty piece of technical thrash metal with a little bit of a black metal edge, a little bit of Vector, a little bit of Havoc, and maybe just a tiny dash of early Revocation, just for a little spice, just for a little bit of a kick. The riffs are razor fucking sharp. In fact, the production across the board is pretty fucking fantastic. Everything is so crisp, so crunchy, so transparent without compromising any of the heft, any of the weight, any of that metallic edge. The only criticism I have whatsoever would probably be directed towards the vocals, which are maybe just a little bit too phlegmy for my personal liking, but they ultimately work in context of the actual music, so fuck it, I will let it slide. Definitely check this out if you're looking for a fun little slice of sci-fi technical thrash. Next up, we have the self-titled debut album from Revulsion, a very weird, angular kind of blackened death metal. It is very noisy, it is very dark, it is very intense. There are some doomy undertones, there are some weird angular riffs and soundscapes. It kind of feels like if Gorguts tried to make a blackened death metal record. A lot of very crushing, almost mathematical compositions. The musicianship is fucking incredible on this thing. The production as well is fantastic. I like the vocals, I love the percussion. The guitar work is so inventive and genuinely unpredictable. I genuinely kind of love this thing to the point where I wish I had more time to really analyze and dissect the sonic maelstrom that this album has presented me. It's chaotic, it's weird, and heavy as fucking hell, and of all of the albums we're talking about in this video, maybe my favorite. Maybe. Next to the Jarhead Fertilizer. And the Forhist record. Alright, it's a freeway tie. Fuck it. You get the idea. It's fucking great. Next up, we have Methods of Human Disposal from Gravesend. This thing's okay. I like aesthetically and conceptually where the album is going. It reminds me a lot of the aforementioned Jarhead Fertilizer. Very rooted in this dystopian hellscape that we unfortunately now have to call reality. But the music itself is just so fucking noisy. And I mean that in a literal sense. Every single moment of this record is caked in very abrasive, static, and pure noise. For me, it just makes for a really genuinely irritating kind of experience. There's too much dirt here. There's too much filth, too much literal noise that I have to scrape away to get to any of the actual fucking meat on here. Which itself, may I add, isn't really that special. It's nothing you haven't heard from the realms of underground death and brutal death metal. There are some kind of grindy undertones here and there, but nothing beyond what I haven't already heard from hundreds of other bands at this point. If you gotta pick between this and Jarhead Fertilizer, definitely pick Jarhead Fertilizer. Definitely. Next up, we have You Can't Go Back from Sarin, an instrumental post and sludge metal band from my neck of the woods, Toronto, Ontario, and I like it. It's very chill, it's very calm, it's got some nice heavy riffs and some nice ambient soundscapes. Instrumental music can be, frankly, kind of hit and miss for me personally because I am almost infamously an impatient motherfucker, but I am really enjoying this. It's nice. It kind of reminds me of some works from Cave In, from Russian Circles. It is very lush, very evocative. There's a lot of emotion actually coming out of this thing, despite the fact that there's no lyrics, no singing of any kind. I'm actually kind of impressed how effectively they can express themselves through some surprisingly minimalistic riffs and percussion. Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot, actually. Wish I had more to say. I don't, unfortunately, but Metal Trenches might, because he interviewed Sarin about a month ago on his channel, so go say hello. And last but not least, we have another recommendation from Feiner, this one being Meso from a band called Project Mishram. And this thing is fucking weird. It is like some Indian jazz fusion meets groove and progressive metal, little bits and pieces pulled from Animals as Leaders and Periphery and Car Bomb and to some extent even the Dillinger Escape Plan, but there are also some trap beats on here. There are some traditional Indian melodies and harmonies on here. It is an utterly bizarre and unpredictable little roller coaster. In its most creative moments, it even reminds me of Diablo Swing Orchestra. Pure, frantic music expression. This is a band that clearly does not give a fuck about genre labels. They just want to make cool, weird, and crazy shit for the sake of cool, weird, and crazy shit. And I fucking love them for it. I honestly kind of want to pick this album up on vinyl. It is just so fucking fascinating and strange in all the best possible ways. Another fantastic recommendation from Feiner. Y'all need to check out his channel ASAP if you haven't already. And that's kind of it for me for now. There are plenty of albums I probably still missed. Feel free to tell me all about them in the comments below. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.